Okay, why are you not on? There you are. That was weird. Okay, you were there and then you weren't.
Houdini.
Right. We're ready to roll. Another great podcast. Yesterday we had a fantastic one with Manny Matsakis. That was great. We probably could have gone for 4 hours easily.
Oh God, easily.
And but yeah, well, he could have told probably enough stories for 4 hours easily.
I'm telling you, man. And
I don't
some
think
of those,
we even had to talk. I don't think he's amazing.
I think that's the first time ever. But I literally, like, some of those I've heard bits and pieces of, but he's the guy, like, it literally, you need like weeks, days to hear all of that stuff that he has involved. I mean, he could go for hours. And now that he's older, he's willing to like say some of those things that like he normally wouldn't have in the past or whatever. But I'm telling you, man, like some of that stuff, it's like, it's the real nitty gritty of like, you would believe this behind the scenes stuff. And it's like, I could sit there for hours.
That's my favorite.
What's that?
Part. That's
yeah. Oh, and he's such a history of the game guy. You know what I mean? Like he.
Okay. I lost you there for a second. I feel like there's I
don't know why I went on mute.
I feel like
we're good.
I feel like there's a spy on my. Like you keep getting muted. It says you chose to mute yourself. It says you chose to mute yourself, dude. Well, Derek's fair. It says that you can't unmute because they chose to mute yourself. But I want to bring on our guest today, Daniel Chamberlain, who has a great podcast. All they do is talk ball, which is really, really. There's probably nothing more enjoyable than that. Hopefully I can't even unmute Derek here, so I don't know what's going on. It may be something with your mic, Derek. But it's great to have you on. I'm excited to talk, obviously about your podcast. Obviously, you've coached football for a long time, and share some of these stories. It's great to have you on.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. Thanks for the invite. I ran into Derek the other night in a different room, Coach's Corner, right, on Sunday night, and shot me an invite. Guys, I couldn't be more excited to be here. I love talking ball. Obviously, you do 2 football podcasts. You better love talking about football.
No doubt about it. Now, so you do the one with Joe Danu where you basically do a lot of like football scheme stuff, and what's the other one that you guys have?
So that one's called the Football Coaching Podcast with Joe Daniel, right. And then the other one is the Coaching 101 podcast, and okay. I'm with Kenny Simpson. Kenny Simpson's a longtime head coach here in Arkansas. He's over in Arkansas, of course, my neighbor. He sells like the gun tee system, stuff like that. So,
yep. I'm very familiar with him. I'm just not sure why, but I definitely am familiar with his stuff. It's great that it's amazing in the world today that you could actually do a podcast and just talk ball and lots of people will listen in. It's amazing. It's this podcast. That's how it's grown, and obviously channels become enormous on YouTube. So it went from 50,000 subscribers. We're over 900,000. So in less than a year.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I had the Coach Schuman page on YouTube probably for running the NUC sports events probably like 2008. So I've had it for 17 years and we were at 50,000 subscribers. But now it's a situation where it just exploded. It just exploded between everything doing. So it's a ton of fun. It's something that we love doing. So tell me how you started getting into all this stuff and you're coaching, but you're also doing this stuff. Tell me how you got into all that.
Yeah. So I'm a military guy. About just hit my 18th anniversary this June. So a couple more years and I can kind of check out of that world and focus all in on football. But I came back from my last deployment, and my mentor in life is a guy named Kenny Ridley. He's a well-known coach in South Central Oklahoma. He's been at it 25 plus years, but he was my DC when I was in school. And he basically just reached out to me. He was like, I know your heart and I know who you are, and you really should think about getting into coaching. And I didn't know about it. I didn't have a teaching certificate or anything. So trying to get the high school level is going to be more difficult. I found True Teachers, which is a government program that turns any 4-year degree into a teaching degree, like a teaching cert, with like
Wow.
you got classroom management or something, right? There's like one extra class you got to take. And so he kind of talked me into it and I got started. And that first year, it was COVID year. So it was 2020 and we went 4-4. And that was a couple forfeits which didn't count on anybody's records that year, but a couple COVID cancellations. And then we went to the playoffs at 4-3, and then we got absolutely smoked in the playoffs. So ended up the year 4-4. But on day 3 of taking that job, the head coach was a first-year guy, a younger guy. He'd played some college quarterback and stuff here in the state. And he basically said, "Hey, dude, I need a DC. Can you do that?" And I was like, I guess, right? Day 3 on the job. I've never coached football before.
Thrown into the fire.
That's right. And so, luckily my life experience is I've made decisions, I've managed people, I've managed time.
Yep.
So it wasn't anything overwhelming. I just didn't know the scheme. So we got through that first year. And then that spring, I literally Googled what's the best defense for high school football. And it popped up Joe Daniels 4-2-5. And that kind of started my path to where I am now. I got on, became a subscriber of Joe Daniels for joedanielfootball.com. And learned a ton. And that summer, he sent out an email to basically all of his subscribers and was like, "I'm looking for a co-host for the podcast." And I applied. I sent him this. I started with, "Here's like 10 reasons you should not hire me," and then
Nice.
here's like 10 reasons that I think I would make a good fit. And he was like,
Good
"All right,
for you,
man,
man.
show up on this date. We'll see if you fit." I thought it was a practice episode. No, it was live. Like we were recording for the podcast. So I just showed up, and good God, I was terrible in the beginning. And once, because I still didn't know a ton of football. I didn't know how to talk on the air in a podcast format, and so it all finally came around. So I've been at that now. Well, that was 2021. That summer's when I started. So just over 3 years now. And
It's awesome.
Kenny Simpson was a guest of ours on the podcast. And of course, Kenny's got a ton of books out there. You can go to
Tons. Like he literally might be the top. Like, I mean, it's just
he just makes
I feel
stuff,
like every
right?
time I turn around, I'm like, "Duh, time to get a new Kenny book." Like, here we go.
Yeah.
Good, like, and which isn't like, if you look at it, a lot of these guys could write books and do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Dave's written a book on leadership.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Different format
it's
because
he's totally different.
There's YouTube channels, and he has a YouTube channel, and he's put stuff there. People have podcasts, which now he's gotten into, but not a lot of people put down their stuff in books, right? It doesn't happen. Joe doesn't write books. I'm starting to write books.
Me too.
Because
I love it. Like, I got the audio, I got Audible, I got the audio books, I got all that, but there is just, to me, I mean, you look like both of us, right? Like, there's nothing like turning a hard page, right? Like, just turn the page, having that book. And I'm a very firm believer of, like, it's not real unless you write it down,
Yeah.
Like kind of one of those things, like when you're setting goals and all that other kind of stuff. So, I mean, Dave's written books. It's just something that not a lot of guys do anymore. I mean, I miss going to a Glazier clinic and looking at a table full of books, right?
Like, I missed that whole part of coaching. I came in, everything's already digital. We're already all on YouTube, right? And so, but yeah, man. So that's kind of how I've gotten where I am. We do record every week and put out something every week, which keeps me in ball, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Football season really never ends for me. I get to kind of talk and think and go out and do football every day. So it's been a great way to increase my football IQ and just become better. Because I mean, obviously, like we're going to talk about, spread option offense on the podcast. I better go research some spread option offense, right? I can't go in and not knowing. So it's been really neat.
Well, I think that one of the things that's really interesting about kind of this space is that you learn so many more things than you would have normally done, because when you're coaching in a certain system, you're running that system. When you're coaching in offense and defense, and you're a coach on a staff, you're running a certain program. the podcast allows you to get all these new ideas and eventually be able to, because you're talking to so many different thought processes, you're able to, oh, okay, this might work with what we're doing, and this might work with what we're doing, and I never haven't tried this technique at all, you know what I mean, type of thing. So it's really, really interesting how that all works.
Yeah, when it's been neat for me because I can go around and talk football with guys who've been at it for 15 or 20 years, generally because it's just football's so conceptual, right? Everything's a concept. It doesn't matter, power is power. It doesn't matter what system you run out of. You have pistol, if you're a gun, if you're it doesn't matter. Power is power. And so I think it helped me to realize that a lot quicker than some coaches because guys, I mean, right now, like I'm between the consulting and working with Joe's pistol power offense and Kenny's gun tee. And, I work with the school I'm at right now over at Bristow. Like I'm deeply involved in 4 or 5 different systems. And so you see where these things cross over and it's all just concepts. And it does make it, you have guys that are like, I can only call offense one way. Well, we have to call formation by this exact name or, every offense is just left or right and then a tag to tell me if it's twins, trips, or whatever. You see that there's 1,000 ways to do everything. There's no wrong way, honestly. I think there's some better ways because now I've seen so many of these systems, but it's not really a wrong way to do football. As long as your heart's in the right place and you're helping kids, the play calling and all that stuff, man, do it whatever you're comfortable with, whatever your kids can pick up on.
Well,
yeah, and I feel like, and we say that
the athletes that you have dictate a lot.
Times. Right.
The athletes that you have obviously dictate a lot of the whole thing. So what you have and what you don't have is a big part of the whole entire picture. And what those kids can do is exactly what you said, and what they can retain, what they can't. You figure that out. Sometimes you could plan it all the way, and then you start putting things in. You realize this group can only retain this, and this group, does this better, and that's the beauty of the adapting of the systems. I think that's also the beauty of learning all the different, no matter what your system is or what your preference is, learning the other ways of doing things. Like I was always like I always hated the wing tee, and then I went and coached at this school up in North Jersey, which was a powerhouse program, and he was his founding principles was wing tee. He was just now in the gun and ran spread out of it, and the QB ran it, but everything was down and kick and down and wrap, and everything was that way. And it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. And now I'm like the gap scheme is the absolute the best way to block in my opinion, to down and being able to wrap guys around and running, the principles of buck sweep and trap and it's such a incredible thing when you incorporate it within your whole entire offense. It's the same offense that Gus Malzahn basically runs at UCF, right? So you got the whole power game, you got the counter game. So I was really a big, I was a zone read, zone pull guy. I would run power, I would run ISO and ISO read off it, and totally adapted. And I found that system was better. And that's the things you get from learning from other people. You really learn how those things work, and then you figure out other things that work as well. It's so interesting how learning from so many different people. That is one of the things that with the clinics, they're in person now, but it's not being the same as
it's not the same. It's not even close to being the same.
Like you used to get before COVID, you used to be able, even though it was changing already, still before COVID, you would get people given like away the farm at a clinic. But once COVID left, it went to online more, and they don't give away the farm the same way they do in person, which is really, really interesting.
Because it's all recorded now, right? And and that video can pop up in 10 years
anywhere.
I'm trying to be cyclical with my football, so we're going to evolve this into RPOs, and then I'm going to cut it back, and now we're going to evolve into zone read, and we're going to cut it back. Well, if my video's out there from 10 years ago, every DC that wants to play me has got everything I've ever put out. It's not like, hey, these 30 coaches wrote it in a notebook, and they're all going to lose it before they get home anyway, right? Like
Right.
No, that crap comes back now. So, yeah, it's a different world.
It's totally different. It is so interesting, right? Because you used to get remember they would do the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Hey, let's have a couple drinks, and now all of a sudden this guy's letting loose on a napkin, right? And
Right.
some of those guys are saving that napkin, and now it's literally, I mean, guys are selling their stuff, right?
Yeah,
And
that's right.
Guys are willing to like, hey, if this guy runs that system, like I can go to a clinic or I can go buy this from, this so I can stop it. And then you know how that works. Like one guy is successful, and then before you know it, everybody's doing the same thing to stop everybody. But I think
what changed that? You were talking before a little bit about the end zone system. When they came out with it, and the Glacier clinics, the guy who owned the Glacier clinics bought the end zone system, and they teamed up and they started selling the end zone system. Because I remember I had to play teams that ran that end zone system, and I literally went online and bought the whole system, kit and caboodle, and then had Noel Mazzone's group come out and run the clinic for me. So I would know how to defend it, right? So he ran the clinic. My kids all, ran through the whole system because it was getting work anyway. And you see a new system, but we knew all the calls, and the teams we played called it verbatim, the same way that he taught it. And literally the play would get called, and the kids the snap would happen, and the kids were running right to the ball, like especially with their screens and stuff. They were running right to it. I mean, they were picking it off. It was wild. So that is why you do see, like, if someone sells the system, well, anybody can share that system. So it especially the terms and terminology, and that was when I realized that you had to change your terminology every couple of years, that how you call it. And even though it's a little bit of a headache for you as the coach, you're better off changing it up, even if it's just half of your terminology. But just so they can't just tee off on it, because people share information, and
yes, they do.
Absolutely.
It becomes a whole new thing. What is some of the unique things that you've learned from run the podcast, that things you hadn't really thought about before?
Yeah, I think the first one has to be that just real football is conceptual, and there is no one size fits all. There's not a perfect offense. There's not a perfect defense. I'm big into like adaptability. So my wife's a physical therapist. We believe in adaptability so much, we named the clinic Adaptable Physical Therapy. I mean, like, we just really believe in being flexible in this ridiculous world we live in. And so I think once I kind of understood that the 4-3 defense isn't the best defense, the 4-2-5 isn't the best defense. There is no best, right? You just gotta have to use what you can to fit your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And once you start, I call it like modularizing or compartmentalizing or whatever, but you can just run so much stuff together.
Yeah,
right? You're talking about all these great systems. Look, I live in the Northeast Oklahoma area. Everyone right now is talking about Bixby football and their 50 whatever points per game they've averaged for 10 years, right? They finally sold the system a couple of years ago. Of course, I bought it because I'm local. I want to know what they're doing. I ended up at Owasso last year, which is, across literally, it's the Battle of the Burbs is the game they play every year.
Yep.
So they play each other. And then I got to see what that system looks like. And you kind of learn that, like, you can do whatever you want in football. You don't have to be stuck in any corner of football. Just adapt it, right? Make things fit your kids. That's probably the biggest one. Just, with coaching, I think I understood there's a lot of coaches out there who don't know what they're doing. There's a lot of coaches that are struggling through. And as like a kid, I can remember being in high school and your coaches were the end all be all. Like, they were the experts of football. Like, my high school coach could also coach the Dallas Cowboys if he wanted to, but he wants to be here, right? That's kind of the belief. And now kind of getting to look out, and I'm like, there are a lot of coaches that are struggling to get by. They don't know. And it's whether it's lack of resources or lack of prioritizing going and getting that education. And it's all out there. That's what makes it so crazy. Especially, we've been talking about this day and age, like, everything's out there. Go learn ball. But there's some that just, it's not a priority to them. People don't live football the way that, like,
Right.
we have podcasts, right?
Yep.
We live football every single day. Football is on my mind. I'm going out and getting better in some way. Look, my resume right now looks like I jump job to job, and it's because every year I'm going somewhere to learn something new. Like someday I'll get a head coaching job, and I'm going to take
everything.
10 teams of experience, 10 amazing head coaches, or maybe bad head coaches, right? Good and bad admin, good and bad schemes, and game planning. I'm going to take all that stuff with me, and I'm going to have the best shot at being a successful head coach versus I grew up in one system. I learned only the way my guy does it. And now I'm going to try to replicate this one way that I know football works at this other school, when it may not be the same administrative support. It may not be the same kids, the same parental support. Like football may not be the same entity at each of those two schools. So
yeah, I think the biggest thing, since I'm probably the elder statesman of this group, and I could tell you the thing that I think is changed the most is that a couple things. The emphasis on hiring within the school system and getting guys jobs. Now, everywhere it's a little different. Texas is obviously vastly different than most other places as far as the fact that they really still kind of emphasize it. And places in Oklahoma do, but Texas as a whole kind of still emphasizes that's why you have a much more better lineage as far as mentorship. And I think that's the thing that you had in the older days that is a little different from now, is the mentorship. And the mentorship of coaches, older school coaches, kind of knew this, whether they were the greatest coach or they weren't, they were better, I think, overall at maybe leadership. Okay, so you may disagree with the way they ran their scheme, or a guy maybe, in the 90s, everybody ran the I, in the early 90s and late 80s. That those schemes evolve, right? But the mentorship on leadership was much bigger because you had these same younger coaches with you, and you knew they were probably going to try and get tenure and be. The education system has changed a lot, right? And football has changed a lot. Now, Texas public schools huge. Where you are, public schools still pretty, but private schools have really evolved to taking over a lot of the top tier part of football around the country. And that changes kind of education a little bit too as well, because those people are in tenured jobs. So you will have a lot more job hopping as assistants, not necessarily head coach, but as assistants. But the mentorship overall definitely changed that component. I think as education changed, and you didn't know that this teacher was going to be here for the next 20 years, that their interest, I think, in mentoring younger staff members probably changed, right? They didn't know if they were going to have a new guy every year, and it wasn't really their fault. It was really kind of the system to an extent. And I think that changed it a lot. So I do agree with you that there is now, in order to get the education, because clinics aren't the way they were. So you could be on this staff in the old days, be on the staff or in the eye, and go sit in a spread system and learn the whole entire spread system in every clinic you want, and that was different. Now, by going to different systems and coaching in different systems, you're able to get that knowledge, which you may not have been able to, that may not have been as helpful before. And I think that's one of the things that has changed. And I think you're right about the fact that now you coach with these different systems, you learn what's good and bad. You get a certain level of experience, and you kind of see what's worked and what hasn't worked. Whereas you could have literally, they get all the information from the head coach and then go into clinics, and they used to encourage that. I remember when I first started coaching in the early 2000s, like that's all I would go to clinics. We were triple option. We were Navy triple option, the place I was at. It was a powerhouse program, and I wanted to learn to spread. And I went to clinics, and those clinics made a huge difference. And then we brought some of the principles to our triple option staff, and they're like, hey, we could run these concepts within our system. And so you could do those things back then. That really has changed a lot. I think being able to go to places where you can learn, coaches you can learn from, and hopefully it's good learning, but coaches you can learn from, makes a big difference. And you see that obviously reflected at the highest level too, right? So that's what's happened at maybe not the NFL, because that's a little different, but college, you see that's happening. That's what a lot of young coaches have done to be able to grow their resumes, coach with different guys on their way up until they got to a certain point. So I think that's a really, really interesting thing. And also the acceleration of how do you get the knowledge for the job you want? Is it going to be at the same place? Because if you're at the same place and the coach is going to be there for 30 years, you may not be able to get that same knowledge, right? Which is a little different.
I think social media and just connectivity of the world has also played a big role in all that, right? I kind of told you my mentor is Kenny Ridley. I can still call him today and we can talk about my scheme, or we can talk about principles, right? And he sent me an email a few years ago like, hey, your coaching tree goes all the way back to Bud Wilkinson at OU. Like, we have a coach in our lineage going, beyond Kenny that was a player for Bud, and then became a coach, and then coached another guy who became a coach, and then it gets to Kenny, and then it gets to me, right? And so I can lean on Kenny regardless of what school I'm at. And so, you're talking about just that mentorship, if you will. You can kind of pick your mentor now. It doesn't have to be the head coach that's in the room with you this year, right?
Right.
Because even like you said, you may disagree with this scheme, you may disagree with this or that. You can pick your mentor, and I think that it's probably better. Honestly, is a better way, but it does build different coaching trees. And I'm gonna make a college football 25 reference here with the video game, because I think it's been really neat when it came out and people are playing it and they're trying to build the ultimate coach, and you run out of points, right? Like, you only get to pick one way. You can only be really good at one thing or kind of good at a few things, but you can't be great at everything. And I think coaches are that way already. Your head coach may not be the best developer of coaching talent. He may be really good at scheme. He may be really good at dealing with parents. He may be really good at social media and promoting the program, but he may not be the best coach developer, right? And so I think it does enforce, like, as you're building your staff and you start thinking about football in this bigger world, like, hey, we might need to put the pieces together where we kind of have coaches that can do a little bit of everything, or you know what I mean?
Right. And I think the other thing that is really is an interesting difference. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. So when a head coach brings in a staff member for a specific job, that person may or may not have been equipped in that role, right? So they're thrown into that role, and I'm curious if you're seeing this as much on staffs, but you kind of nowadays you really kind of lean on the head coach to help teach you what you did position wise for what he needed. And I see now more guys go externally for that, or if they don't go externally, sometimes they get unhappy pretty quickly. So, what do you think younger coaches should do in order to gain the knowledge and be? Because one of the things that I always found, and this is hard now, was the most important thing as a head coach was loyalty on your staff. Okay, to me that was always the single most important thing. And anytime it didn't matter if a guy ended up going somewhere else the next year, but while he was there, that he was super loyal to what we were trying to get accomplished. But that to me has changed a lot over the years. So whereas a lot of guys are picking up their heads before the season ends, or not doing the job where their feet are, and are constantly picking their head up. What do you think a lot of, and I know Derek obviously has experience he's been at quite a few places, and he's seen a lot of he's kind of in that in-between land. He's still really young, but he's now nearing 40, right? You're 37, 38. 38. So nearing 40. So you're kind of in that in-between land. He's not a younger coach, but he's starting to, he's not no longer the younger guys on the staff now. He's kind of starting to get a little bit older, and you're seeing that change. What do you think young coaches should really try to get accomplished when they're with the staff? Because I think that's where I see more of the disconnect with coaches that have been around for a while, maybe 20 years, 15 years, and they have a harder time with some of the younger assistants because those guys are always looking for that next job, and they know they're looking for that next job, but yet while they're there, they're trying to get as much as they can out of them. What's kind of your advice there?
So I learned in the military a long time, I mean, from like year 3 or so, when someone finally told me what being in the military was all about. But there's a statement that's basically like, nobody cares about your career as much as you do. So you better take care of yourself. And that meant administratively and making sure you're getting promotions and make sure you're going to schools and squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of thing, right? Take care of your military career because no one else gives a shit. And unfortunately, I mean, that's held pretty true throughout my 18 years. If like you aren't willing to promote yourself and go out and go after what you need, no one else is going to either, especially on National Guard. So people have 28 days a month. They're a banker or a construction worker, whatever. For 2 days a month, they're your boss. So I kind of feel
that's got to be tough. Jeez.
Yeah. I think it's the same way. I think that you are now a professional. If you're a coach now, you are a professional. And you better take care of your own career. So in the beginning, those first year or two, look, year 1, essentially, I coached 1 season with no external help. I found Joe Daniel, and it made me legitimately in 3 years, I can talk football with 10 and 15-year guys, and we can be on the same level, football IQ-wise, stuff like that. So it's like, where do you want to be as a coach? Do you want to live in this one system? And then fine, just stay where you're at and don't get any external help. But you better be able to assess what your coach can actually develop you in. Can he teach you? Is he a guru when it comes to scheme? Or are you going to learn this very, very simple thing that you can't use to get an advantage later in life, right? Maybe he's really good at teaching you how to talk with parents. You've got to be able to see what that guy offers you to see if you should stay in-house or not. And like I said a while ago, we're not all the best at everything. It's impossible. And so I think you better go external. If you're a head coach and you've got these young guys, teach them everything you can because you want them to stay, right? Someday I'm going to take over, and I understand that the volatile system we live in, coaches are going to come and they're going to go because it's attached to teaching. That's the other thing too, right? You've got
the job part. I think that's the biggest part, not to interrupt you, Dan, but I think that's a huge, huge factor is because one, we all know that being a high school coach, unless you're the head guy in Texas or one of these big schools, you're not making what could support a family by any means, right? Absolutely. There's stipend positions. A lot of them, there's literally no protection. You're coaching. It's basically a 1-year contract, if that. Right? Because most of these guys will tell you kick rocks if it's not whatever. So you're only getting like 1 paycheck. A lot of that stuff, you can't live off a high school coaching assistant job with a family. It's impossible. You can't do it. So it has to be attached to an actual job. And that's tough. A lot of these guys, like some schools have that, hey, if a guy in the building applies for it, he gets it over an outside guy. Like there's a lot of rules like that. And then the job thing, it's not like, hey, rarely do you see now private schools might have a little more wiggle room in terms of creating things, right? Right. Or creating jobs for, coaches and whatnot. But for the most part, because it's attached to that job, it makes it extremely difficult to find guys. And even if you get coaches that are outside of a building, they have to have a certain type of job that basically allows them to be free from 2 p.m. for the rest of the night, right? And for at least 4 months a year. If you want to do it right, they better be there sometime in the off season. And we don't get paid for that. You know what I mean? Like all that weight room time in the spring and the winter, not to like just go on a tirade here, but it's like that stuff matters and that factors in.
Yeah, it kind of, even if you're a head coach that has the best football program and you're putting a ton of resources to develop your staff and whatever, all the newest gadgets to keep you on par with technology, and you're promoting your kids to go to college and you're doing everything perfect, but your superintendent sucks. People aren't going to stay there with a terrible admin, even though you've done your best part with the piece of pie you control. Right. So it's just so many variables.
Great point. Absolutely. Right, yeah, Dave? Dave, we've lived it, Dave. Like we've lived it.
No matter, you could have the greatest coaching staff. if the top, the people who really have the quote unquote power over the system, the
It's not happening.
superintendent, principal, athletic director, if everybody's not aligned as to where the program should be going, and then they hire a coach that is aligned with that, I think in the long run, even if you have success, in the long run, it's going to end somehow. Because
I mean, Dave, we've seen it.
And even, yeah, absolutely. And even
with
places
the greatest coaches here in New Jersey, guys that have literally won, 56 games in a row.
Yeah, well, even like, so if you come into a system, let's say a guy's even been there for 20 years, he's had a ton of success. Superintendent changes, principal changes, has a different idea about things. That's going to change the football program. There's no doubt about it, and that's how you see guys, older coaches retire because all of a sudden there's a system change at the top, right? And they decide, okay, this is not going to work the same way that's worked the last 10 to 15 years. But it's really, really it's really an interesting thing. Tulsa football, the area that you're in, really has actually some I'm not sure if they're still powerhouse programs, but I remember they used to be powerhouse programs like Tulsa Union.
Guess that hasn't changed.
What's the one that the Jenks is a power?
Is the other one.
They still a power. They still powerhouse.
Northeastern Oklahoma runs football, my man. It is crazy. Owasso, Bixby, Jenks, Union. Like, I would have to go back and really dig in history, see them the last time a west side of the state team won the state championship. I mean, it's crazy how good those teams are. So yeah, those four are still like the big powerhouses. Broken Arrow won a state championship a couple of years ago. So all of that is, all those are in the Tulsa metro. Tulsa is Oklahoma football. That's crazy.
Interesting because is Oklahoma City a much bigger area per se?
Is that why? Is it like bigger population? Is that why?
If I remember correctly, Oklahoma City is like the third or fifth or something biggest city in acreage in the nation.
Okay.
It's just very, very wide. I mean, they've put a lot of land as attached to Oklahoma City. But I don't know population. I'd have to Google it. It's truly outside of my.
It's crazy to hear about land, Dave, isn't it? Like, because we're in New Jersey where literally people are stacked on top of people. Like, we have high schools that have their fields on the roof of the school, right? And it probably is one of the greatest, coolest settings ever. But, like, that's what we're talking about. Here you are talking about, like, cities having acreage. Like, New York City has what? Central Park? Maybe, like, I mean, it's just it's wild to fathom. I know Dave's been there. I obviously have not. But it's just, to me, it's hard to like process all of that.
So I just Googled it, and Oklahoma City is 621 square miles with a population of about 700,000. Tulsa, I don't know square mileage, but their population is about, this says 411,000. I feel like that's probably about right. So
it's a little more condensed Tulsa than Oklahoma.
Right. So it is much more condensed. But for whatever reason, man,
Tulsa King is making it more popular, I'll tell you that.
Well, that's a great show, by the way.
I live here.
Yeah, I'm telling there's gonna be people like going to Tulsa now just because Sylvester Stallone's doing a show about it.
Great
show.
Here we go. Great show. Well, Oklahoma City though has one of the great steakhouses, that one of my favorites of all time. The Cattleman's. It's out.
Cattleman's over in the
Stockyards. Yeah,
in the Stockyard district. Yeah, man. It's good. I've been there. I'd rather eat a homemade steak, I'll be honest, but it's not terrible.
It's easily accessible for you, man. Come on, we gotta we gotta buy it in a store. You guys could like literally go where it is and pull it out. Like,
right.
That's so interesting. So where do you see a football going as a whole? Like, as far as from a learning standpoint for coaches, and where do you see it's going to continue to evolve from a learning standpoint? You think platforms like this are going to be kind of just the mainstay? This is how it's going to be, and everything's going to be for the most part online, other than the one or two big conferences, the coaches conventions. But what are you thinking there?
I think football in general is going to be cyclical. So, we're already watching in the NFL this year, right? They're talking about, you've got some yahoos out there with very large platforms screaming ban 2 high safeties, like because the passing game has gotten shut down, right? Like the run is taking back over. I think, there we can just look at the evolution of ball, man. When offense learned, hey, I can get more receivers and speed on the field and take advantage, defense had to go out and counter that with lighter framed bodies, more speed, more athletes. And in football, offensive guys said, cool, let's go back to the phone booth. Like, can your speed and athleticism come in here and play with my third tight end? No, it can't. So football is going back into a phone booth, and defenses will have to counter that with bigger bodies. We're going to start seeing bigger linebackers. And that's across the nation, right? I mean, we're seeing, weirdly enough, this is a time in history that high school ball is trickling up more than NFL ball is trickling down. I think NFL is still, unless you're the Miami Dolphins, you're still going out in very few formations and running a lot of things out of few formations. The Dolphins, of course, are I don't know why the influence is there to do it, but they're what every high school team wants to be. Gap scheme, RPOs, screens, 1,000 formations, right? I love doing the podcast with Kenny Simpson because, that's what his gun T system is. And then we get to watch the Dolphins run it on Sunday. So it's made it a lot of fun. But right now, I think high school has got a lot of influence on the spheres above it. So we look at that college echelon. People are hiring high school coaches because what you're facing every week with the diversity in offenses and defenses. And then, I think that's trickling up to the NFL. So I think it's going to stay cyclical, man. We'll get back into the phone booth for a couple of years. We'll build the defenses a little bit different. And then offense will say, oh, just kidding. We're going back to the spread. I don't think there's nothing new under the sun. There's still a set of rules that keeps us limited to what we can do. And I think we'll just continue watching whoever the minds are that year that are really good are the guys that can take the rules and bend them to their advantage, whatever that means. RPOs is a big one, right? Like when the RPO came around, and obviously very, very popular right now. The read
just like the Wildcat was for a little while.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you've just these things will go away and they'll come back. And then I think platform-wise, talk about talking ball and just spreading knowledge. I mean, it's the internet age. I think podcasts are always going to be popular. People just sitting around and talking football because, look, I can sit in a room with guys and talk football for days. It does not bother me. I love it. But I understand that doesn't always fit into our schedules, right? We just talked about it. You got to be a teacher generally at high school level from, 7:30 is your contract report time and you don't get out until 5:30. When I can't go to the coffee shop or the bar and have a beverage and talk football with my buddies, right? There's just not enough time anymore. The world's gotten too busy, right? We're really built on this. Like everyone has to have a job, a side hustle. Their wife has to have a job and a side hustle to raise kids anymore. So I think we've lost that ability to sit around and just talk ball. So I think these podcasts are what's going to do it. Guys can download this, listen to it on their phone while they're driving to work or while they're trying to work out and keep some kind of physical fitness. And I think that's always going to be there. I love that Kenny's writing books because that's still a thing, right? We build these little coaching libraries. I've got mine, I'm sure you guys have got some coaching books around you, but I think that's still another way. I don't think that's ever going to go away either. Yeah, man, I think that's where it is. I don't know that there isn't another thing coming around, right?
Yeah, I
YouTube
also
is big, and then shorts, like people using TikTok or shorts or whatever to teach football.
The shorts have really allowed us in our platform to take off, right, Dave?
Yeah.
We do this long content, but then when we cut this up, that's what everybody wants to see, right? The reels, the 15 to 20 seconds, because it's the world we're living in that age of now, and attention spans that don't last longer than 30 seconds. And we're on to the next thing. It's just, and you're talking about like speed of the world in general. I mean, for us, I haven't been many places, but the Northeast where we are is fast paced. I mean, even the fact when me personally, when I relocated just from, North Jersey, down 100 miles south, it's like changed. I'm like too fast down here. It's like, you know what I mean? So I can only imagine going other places outside of this where we're talking about pace and all that other kind of stuff. I mean, you're talking New York City where it's like, it's so fast. People are talking like everything is fast. So to just slow down and, like you said, talk ball. I think those like those reels that are 15 seconds, 20 seconds, like that's really what allowed our channel to kind of really take off.
Yeah, and the algorithm begins to feed you what you're looking for, which is really great. Like, if you're starting to watch a lot of video content on offensive plays, they're going to start feeding you more and more of that stuff. And I think I think that's good for the most part. It could kind of lend you in one direction, but it is good for the most part. I also think what's interesting about football, because the fact that running the ball again obviously is important, because there's less teaching and tackling, and there's less time put into tackling, and there's more guys that are playing in space. I think what you'll see in college, and I agree that the high school is it used to always be, it was top down. It's now it's bottom up, and but I think specialization is going to be a thing. Like, I think, when they go to 105 scholarships at the division, now lower levels than Division I think will be different. They may not be able to specialize in the same way. So, if you're in a conference that has most teams running the spread, and then you go play a team that's just banging you downhill, you could be in trouble. But the big schools, the power, 4 schools who are going to take advantage of having 105 scholarships and less roster size, they're going to make all those players specialize. You're going to have guys that can do everything, but you're going to have specialized guys. I mean, you're going to have guys that are just line shifting. And so I think you'll start to see like offenses that will come downhill. Like in the old days, if the team came downhill running the ball in the phone booth, they huddled. But eventually you might get the combination of more no huddle coming downhill, right? Because they can't change to the big personnel. So they can't shift and get that big guy in there to stop the run. And they're stuck with those smaller guys, and then they got to call a timeout or fake an injury or whatever,
right.
Whatever they have to do in order to slow it down. And I think that's because guys are going to try and specialize. And so if you can get the right personnel on the field at the right time offensively and dictate that, and then go fast, it's good. You're going to get several plays off before they can change the course of things. And I think what you see, like the Georgia-Alabama game was, I think, indicative in the long run of how you'll see where those teams can do literally everything. Yeah. They literally can run downhill. They can run outside. They can chuck it down the field. The QB can take off if need be, and they can throw the short game. That was not a thing 10 years ago. I mean, just 10 years ago, you did not, if Alabama was known for running the ball, even just 5 years ago, Georgia was really known for running the ball. It wasn't
absolutely,
so those things, I think, are shifting. And I think it was an unbelievably exciting game when you saw two teams that literally can do everything on the field. I think it made for a totally exciting game. And I think, at the NFL level, I think it's interesting because you have the Kansas Cities of the world and the Dolphins of the world who are doing a lot of different stuff scheme-wise. And then you have Baltimore Ravens that are basically coming downhill with the Q and the running back, and then a very laser-focused passing game right off of it. So it's really interesting, the evolution. But you're right. What Bixby does, and I don't know if Derek, if you're familiar with Bixby, but you can find millions of clips online.
I'm looking it up now, brother.
What Bixby does in the run game is unbelievable. It really is unbelievable what they did. It really changed the way everybody was running so much spread, and Bixby is coming downhill. And they're running that gap scheme, and they're not just pulling the guard and a center. They're wrapping 3 guys around. I mean, they're wrapping 3 guys. They'll wrap 4 guys if they can, if you give it to them.
I look at it like this too, Dave.
They'll wrap everybody around.
I think in their system, you can pull 5 guys.
Is that what it is?
You can run GT plus 3, I think, is the max. But then with motion, you're adding another kick out guy. So now you've technically got a sixth, right? So it's crazy. It's a lot of fun to be around. It's a lot of fun because now I'm working with some coaches that left Bixby and went to another school, and so I'm getting to kind of learn the system.
Are they doing what they're doing? Like, are they doing?
Yeah.
Or did they take Bixby and now they're?
They took the offense and defensive systems, and because they were in the system for so many years, and they're like.
And how does that head coach feel about that situation?
Well,
he had really
no,
good.
I'm not. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying
you make a good point, and kind of what we talked about earlier. Coaches, develop your assistants.
That's why I'm asking.
Because some guys,
you have head coaches, right? And they go one of two ways. They either love the fact, like they want those guys to go get hired and get their jobs. And it's, hey, man, awesome. I'll give you whatever you need. Like, go do your thing, right? And then you have some guys that are like, well, what do you do? What are you doing? Where you're supposed to, you're my OC, you're my DC, right? I think there's less of those guys. And now, because the way of the world, like, I think they keep more of that stuff internalized. But I think, you're always going to have guys that are kind of against guys leaving and doing other things.
Right.
And they just have to handle that their own way,
the price of being good, man. If you're good at what you do,
look, if guys
want
to take your coaches, I think you're doing something right. You know what I mean? And I always been a proponent of, like, that's awesome, man. If you have an opportunity to go do, whatever. But unfortunately, a lot of that stuff, like we've talked before, hey, coach, like, these guys are going to give me a history job. I'm going to be in the building. They're also giving me, I'm getting another weight room stipend. Or, hey, they're going to allow me to coach track. So it's like, coach, I'd love to stay here and because I love this place and do all this other kind of thing, but my family needs this. So it's kind of I've been in them a lot, right? Because, like you said, I've bounced around from place to place because, I wanted to see, hey, if I'm going to teach, do I like middle school? Do I like, this or that? And as a special ed teacher too, as well, like, those jobs kind of open up and you got to take those opportunities. Can I coach there? Can I do this? What's the commute like? Because obviously, like Jersey, you're worried about traffic, not distance so much, but, if I get out of school at 2:30, can I get to practice at whatever time or any of those kind of things? There's a lot of those factors that I don't think a lot of people think about in terms of, hey, man, I'm just going to go be an assistant coach, or, hey, now I took this job. It's closer to home, right? I can save on gas and all this other. There's so many factors that go into it. Like, we all wish we could just coach ball for a living,
The Southwest in general, meaning like Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, for the most part, it goes. If you go back to like Dow Royal gave Bud Wilkinson the system. Like, he had all those guys down there when he was running the triple option and taught it all to them. And Bud Wilkinson ended up beating him with his, with his own system. With his own system, right?
Well, Dave, didn't like when we talked with Manny Matsakis yesterday, right?
Well, we were talking about Tony, who you had on, I think.
Tony DeMeo.
Tony DeMeo, because he was originally went and learned from Dower Royal.
I'm just saying, like, in order, like, he was willing to, like, he took a system, he took another system, he mashed them together, he made it his own, but then he started, giving it out to others, right? And now, like, you have this system, like, that's my system winning, or that's my system winning. Look, man, if you lose to your system, it is what it is. It's the same thing as, Nick Saban going against Kirby Smart in SEC championships when Kirby was literally his right-hand man for how many years? Like, It is what it is, dude. Like, that's part of the whole thing. Bobby Bowden, Jimbo Fisher, right? Like, all those types of stuff. Like, guys go other places and you got to compete against them, and just that's just how it is.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting about Bixby is of pulling all those guys in pin and pull. The fact that I guess their rules are basically like, if they have that angle where they can block back and you're uncovered in some fashion, you're going. They're blocking back and they could do it across the board. It's funny because we used to have a discussion about this like it might have been 10, 11 years ago, because I was doing some pin and pull. And we were like, could we pull three guys? Because the rule, you're like, you pull these two guys. Like, they're like, what if we just do? So we were doing it with like any guy that wasn't, any guy that had a down block, take the down block. Anybody who was basically uncovered or didn't have an opportunity for a down block, you wrapped around. And we started to do that. And that included backs and sniffers and, even wing backs, any of those guys, even removed slots, right? Like wrap around inside and you're now a lead on which is kind of some of that stuff comes. A lot of it is just pure wing T expanded, right? Because it's the wing is the lead on belly in wing T, right? So it's just taking all of those things and like expanding it to the extreme. That's what I think would made so the first time I saw the videos of it, I was like, what? All those guys are oh my goodness. And then their pass game off of it, like guys are like literally like, because they're running so much, like no one's even covering these guys because they have to get involved in the run game so much. Right. Otherwise, you're going to get blown off the ball.
It's definitely fun to kind of be around and watch them. They're not doing anything fancy. They're just dressing up common. You talked about being wing team-esque, and I think that's the way football is going, right? We talked about it being cyclical. It's kind of like Kenny's gun T systems. The same thing. Obviously, it is wing T, right? He's majoring in buck sweep to where, those guys over in Bixby aren't necessarily majoring in buck sweep. In fact, it's just a tag, right? When I talk about modularizing or compartmentalizing, dude, that's where I kind of picked it up, was reading through their system and then working with my current OC, who's the guy that, he was the freshman OC there for a long time. And so where you spend years getting good at buck sweep, they're just like, hey, this is power, but we're going to tag it and pull these two guys instead. Or maybe it was even inside zone and we're going to pull, it's inside zone blocking rules, but we're going to pull two guards. And so they've just taken this tag, like they've taken the world of tags and made it work in all aspects. So you talk about all those pullers, right? It's just a tag. There may not even be a rule. But I think football is going that way in general, just with the, we talked about gap down backer, right? It's the old school wing T gap down backer. That's a very simple rule. Well, then pin and pull comes along. It's like, well, how do you teach pin and pull? Well, gap or pull, right? If I don't have a down block right there, I'm just going to pull. And so you just take these very simple rules and make football look crazy complex.
Correct.
And the old lineman's like, this is just a play. It's just another version of power almost.
Same play. Exactly. Derek, so when I was at Powell
Same
Park,
girl, different dress, brother.
So what we used to do, I'll give you an example of a call. So we used to run like from pistol.
You've always been in, Dave. You've gone pistol for a long time now.
Well, I was in pistol and I was in regular gun, but we would go. So what we used to do, and this will kind of explain it a little bit. So we used to run a regular pitch sweep called Sweden. That was our pitch sweep. We'd pitch it, and everybody would zone block it, and then we would tag it. We would tag at Hercules, and then when we tagged at Hercules, that meant that no longer were we all zoning it. We were downing, and Hercules meant both guards pulled and led, right? So they were leading, basically very similar to like a Lombardi sweep, but now they're down. We got down blocks and we were pulling rapid. And all we did was it was the same play. It was Sweden. It was regular old school pitch sweep, and then it was Sweden Hercules, and all of a sudden you had the same play. Backfield action was exactly the same, but now the line was down blocking and wrapping. And now you had to prepare. And then what we used to do off of that was basically the QB would boot off of it. And then we would have a tag to wrap a guy around for his boot. So we would have a tag for the wrap around for the QB boot off of it. So instead of it being a naked, which we had a naked call, but instead of it being naked, you actually had basically a sweep off the boot for the QB. And it was the same play. And then you tagged it with a receiver that would come across, literally one guy going to the flat, the same exact play. And you have 4 or 5 plays off the same exact play. Dude. And the kids, if you ask the kids from my team back then, they'd be like, oh, coach basically runs 5 plays. Like, because to them, it was just the same play. Like, he doesn't run that many plays.
Yep.
But to the other team, I remember coaches would say this, and when we were together at Red Bank, Derek, the coaches, they'd be like, oh, you run so much stuff. And I'm like, it's really just exactly what you said, tag. Now, I'm sure Bixby's doing a scaled up version of that, right? I don't know how they're exactly calling it, but however they're calling it, and teams like that. When you go to tagging and tagging, like I learned about tagging from my buddy was he played in an arena for in the early 2000s, a quarterback in arena football, and everything is tagged. Everything is tagged. So receiver route, everything is tagged. And he was talking to me about offense, and when I was taking over as a head coach, he's like, just tag that. And I'm like, what do you mean just tag it? He's like, just, how do you call, how do you call your guys? Well, we used like a number system for players, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But most people use, X, H, B, Y, Z, right? So you just tag that guy and you tell him what you want him to do. And then you just have a call that if you're going to know how, you just have a word that's obviously they know, not the other team knows that so they know what that tag is, right? And we started doing it, and I was like, oh my God, we could run these plays and just have such a variation on these plays that it becomes very difficult to stop. And for a defensive coordinator, because I came from the defensive side of the ball, I played defense, I know how difficult it is, because when someone's running zone blocking, then all of a sudden they're running pin and pull. Like, you're teaching different things on the D line, like how to handle certain things. And for a defensive lineman, a zone block versus a down block is a totally different thing. And taking on pullers versus taking on someone that's coming at you is a totally different thing. So now they're learning on the D line 3 or 4 different things, and the linebackers have to learn what the different scraping components is, which is why a lot of offenses, of defenses, which I found the best defensive coordinators have gone to, is basically what I call replacement theory. Basically, you make the farther back you are, the linebackers make the D linemen right, the safeties make the linebackers right, because if you kind of go the old way on things, then what happens is the D lineman gets out of place or gets in the wrong spot, and now the linebacker's filling the wrong spot. You have a touchdown. But
because it creates those creases and those gaps where now guys, like, nobody's there, right? You don't have a back player, you don't have somebody fitting, like, it just, boom, you're banging your head on a goalpost.
Replacement theory allows everybody to fit the right way in the run game all the time, and then you just have to rep it. Obviously, you got to rep it. If you don't rep it, they're not going to get good at it. But you rep that, and then linebackers start to realize, hey, what would the running back run to? Grass, obviously, right? So he's not going to run into his guy. So you have to go when you're replacing, you're going towards where the grass would be. That's how you fill the spots. And that's totally different than like when I played in the mid 90s in the 4-3, you know what I mean? And we had gap responsibility, and I was a Sam linebacker, and I was C gap to backside A, right? Front side C, backside A. And that was my gap responsibility. And then if it stretched, then I could go out to D, right? But I had a gap responsibility, and my job was to take care of that gap. And the D lineman's job would take. If you just do that now, and the way as these games have evolved, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
You get cooked, son. Yeah.
Yes, that's the word right there. You're going to get cooked.
We're talking about tags right now on offense, and I love the ability. Like, we can tag any kid on the offense and have them do something different, right? You're talking about running 5 plays. Look, I want to base out of like power, counter, and let's just talk there. Power and counter are the same damn play with a tag, right? Once you get football conceptually, you asked me earlier, like, what was the big thing I realized, but like, that's it. It's concepts. It's just block down, kick out, wrap. So it doesn't matter who does the kicking and the wrapping. So once you start teaching football like that, it's just a tag. Hey, we're going to run Patriot's power. Okay, cool. Well, now we're going to run Patriot swap. Well, now I'm running counter out of the sound, and I don't have to teach 2 plays. And now I'm running Patriot swap with a read, right? Now we're going to read the backside defensive end. The O-line has learned 1 play and 1 tag, and now the quarterback learns to hand it off or read a defensive end. And you just get in this motion of like this new way of calling offense where I'm going to call 5 things. And I'm going to tag the crap out of everything and make defenses scream, because like you said, DCs they're meticulous, right? I was a DC for a while too. I want to put every play on paper. Well, man, when it's inside zone, outside zone, power, counter, pin and pull, truck toss, jet sweep, power read, I'm doing all this stuff out of 3 plays, and you're having to track. Coach, they have 7 run plays, and I'm not really bad at any of them. Like, which one do you want me to stop this week? You know what I mean?
That's exactly it.
I tell you what it did for the defensive side of the ball, and I credit Joe Daniel with this because of his system, but it made defensive have simpler rules. And you were talking about teaching a D lineman to handle a down block versus a pull versus a zone. You just got to get to where it's all the same, right? We teach there's 2 blocks in D line that the D lineman has to worry about. Is he reaching or basing me? I want to post hip and rip. I got to get my hips in my gap, rip across, play football. And then block away is play away. So if I get a down block, I'm not teaching him that's a down block. I'm teaching him that's outside zone the other way. So you better haul ass down the heel line and go catch outside zone the other way. If there happens to be a puller coming, oh well, you've naturally caused a train wreck or a wrong arm or however you're teaching used to we had to pick one. Who cares, man? Run the heel line. It's outside zone the other way. When you run into that big guard or tackle or H-back or whatever coming to kick, you've caused the disruption we all want. So once again, it's that compartmentalizing football. Put it back into concepts. Put it back into simple schemes. I love what you're talking about, replacement theory. We don't teach gaps for linebackers anymore, right? It's close open windows. Read your guard. He gets you started. Read back flow. That tells you where the ball's going. And then close open windows and spill it. We're spill to force. We're not.
Exactly.
I'm not boxing a defensive end. I know a lot of people want to box D linemen. Fat people who are immediately coming in contact with other fat people and they're all super strong, can move houses. I cannot expect them to also get out in space and box, the modern day quarterback or running game. No.
Which you have to be account for now because almost every quarterback has some higher ability to run or at least get you a first down, right? So if you don't account for that guy, that's how they're going to burn you. It's the fastest way to lose, right? Quarterback that can run, oh boy, figure it out.
You see it you see in the NFL, okay, they started with Justin Fields, literally QB sweep, okay? Running QB sweep because there's one extra person, which you don't account for, which is the QB. And you saw it last week. I can't remember who did it also. Jaden Daniels.
Jaden Daniels is starting to do it.
Just running QB sweep. There was a year when I was coaching up in North Jersey, and the team I had, I was in the second year there, and we really had not much. But we had a kid that was a really good athlete, and I made him just a quarterback. And we used to run like this concept we used to call box, and we would put everybody to one side. Okay. And I got it. I learned it from this guy who used to run this thing called Great Wall. He used to run Great Wall, and he put everybody to one side and basically down it, and wrap on the outside. Right. So we just kind of took that concept and put all the skill guys to one side and ran QB sweep, and we'd be down in where we could down on the outside and rapping, and everybody the whole entire group would do that for the outside. The kid ran for the team wasn't great, but they were much improved because the quarterback ran for 1,300 yards, and he was a tough SOB, and he could, if he got a crease, he could break it, and we would just run that to death, and every once in a while he was good enough to get the ball there, and you'd run a pass off of it, and those guys would fake block and just go vertical, and he'd get it there, and it was a touchdown. So that team who really could have been a team that could have been in danger of not winning any games won 3 games. I mean, so that's what you talk about adapting, and I think that's the beauty thing. You're able to tag that and do the things that you need to do off of those plays, and then we would run jet off of it to the opposite way, and then the other guy who was a decent skill kid, you get some yards from it, and I think that's that is the beauty of the offenses now, and that's what I'm sure if I was sitting in on most of these offensive staffs in college, that's what a lot of what's going on, and that's what a lot of the younger coaches really are bringing. It's like, why are we locked into just doing just this, that was what the wing T, my original hatred for the wing T was that it was locked into these 4 plays, basically, belly, trap, buck sweep, and then the counter crisscross, and then you'd have waggle, off of it or boot, and that was it. And once your team got the right personnel that could stop it, that's what's so beauty about how they evolved the wing T, because now you're taking the beauty of the blocking scheme and getting rid of the fixation on just these quote unquote plays. And now you have it's the best blocking scheme. So as far as being able to gain yards run wise, because you see teams that just run the wing T and they run for acres, even if they're not a great team, they would run for acres. So it's a great blocking scheme.
Right.
Coach, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Please let us know, how they could reach you, podcasts, everything like that, and any of your final thoughts, Coach.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter. That's where I spend most of my coaching social media time, at Coach Chambo OK. And that's kind of where I'm sharing my thoughts. Share a lot of Sooners football and softball because I'm an Oklahoma guy. I went to the University of Oklahoma, and so
Softball, man. That stuff's awesome there, man. That stuff's awesome.
I did start a Patreon recently, so I'm into consulting. You can see under my name there, Chamberlain Football Consulting. I help with youth teams, high school teams, whatever you need. There's a few different levels on my Patreon. So if you're needing defensive coordinator help, if you're needing to break down your opponent, if you need to look at what they're doing, defensively, so you can need help on offense or self-scout, or just simply, there's even like levels on there where you just jump in and learn from me once a week or whatever. So kind of find a level that's right for you. That's the way that I'm selling it to my wife, that I can actually make this coaching from not teaching thing work. We'll see. Happy wife, happy life, Coach. That's right. I got a YouTube, Chamberlain Football Consulting's YouTube, and I have a website, chamberlainfootballconsulting.com. I'm really not good at building websites, so it's very basic, and it's there, and you can find both of the podcasts there. I don't really know what it does besides cost me money outside of that. And then the podcast, the biggest ones, man. So, the football coaching podcast with Joe Daniel, that comes out every Thursday, I believe. And then the Coaching 101 podcast, we usually post them on Sundays or Mondays, but those are just shows of me and two other guys that are longtime coaches. They're both way over, they're in them 20 years and plus. And, we just talk concepts. We talk leadership. We talk program development, coach development, dealing with parents. I mean, everything is out there. Everything's kind of on the table in those two podcasts. I understand that scheme doesn't solve all problems, right? You can't X's and O your way out of every single issue in football coaching. So we're just trying to make very well-rounded coaches. Absolutely. No, it's awesome, Coach. I can't thank you enough for coming on. And we'll see you real soon, man. You ever want to come on, talk anything? We're glad to bring you on and talk some more. Awesome. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate talking with you guys. And yeah, I'd love to come back on. Let's set it up. Absolutely. That sounds great, Coach. I'm sure Derek will connect you, get that all set up. So have a great day, Coach, and we'll see you soon. All right. Thank you so much. Right, see you later, Coach. All right. That was great, man. Great. We're going to get good off stuff. Here. Interesting path, man. Not really a football, you know what I mean? Just kind of jump in, and you want to talk about accelerating a process and learning a lot in a short amount of time. And kind of like what we talked about a lot right there was, because all of that stuff is out there, you have a guy who literally has the ability to go from, here to here in a very short period of time. Yep. I didn't know I was doing innovative stuff in the old days. I was just trying to win a few games. Look at you, brother. Look at you, brother. I was trying to figure out how we can win some games and teach it to kids that had no idea how to knew nothing about football originally. And what do you mean? What do you mean you don't take over juggernaut programs? No, but Powell Park was really where I learned to tag things and stuff, because we were just like, how are we going to get these our backgrounds, right? Because of what I grew up in. I mean, you talked to the guy that was responsible for what I was, from 5th grade, I was running that stuff, man. What I mean? All of those concepts that to some people, it's like, dude, that's Looney Tunes. And I'm like, what do you mean? This is how you do it. So for me to now go and learn all those other systems. Thank God for DJ. DJ taught me that. I mean, the structure from Saddlebrook's triple option was great to learn, but then the tags from the tag that, and then
that was just the beginning. And then I was like, oh, can you tag the runs? You know, that's when I started to be like, you can tag receivers. Can we tag run game? And we started doing that because we were like, man, like, we got to do something. So sometimes
look, you got to find a way to win, right? And you got to work with what you got. And now those are the best coaches, right? That makes something, you know, make chicken soup out of chicken shit. Like, good job, buddy. Like, usually it goes the other way. You know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes you got to do some crazy stuff where people are like, what the hell are you doing? But do you think like the first time that, you know, Matsakis showed up and was like a, you know, an empty set or he was in a 2x2 set and he's running belly or he's running jet sweep or he's doing like, you have to like look like a crazy person to like be successful, dude. Like, take a chance. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, get back to the drawing board.
You got to break some eggs in order to make an omelet. All right.
Oh, got it.
Well, there you go. All right. So I got to jump on another one here. So let's roll. That was a great podcast. And I'll see you soon.